The fire is already lit. Sit down, breathe, and listen. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he discovered something terrifying. There's an exact moment when this becomes dangerous. Imagine for a second. You might finally be healing, setting boundaries, saying no, choosing yourself perhaps for the first time in years. And then, out of nowhere, the person you tried hardest to please has an emotional breakdown, a devastating crisis. Right when you were at your strongest. Coincidence? Jung discovered it's not. In this video, you'll discover the secret psychological protocol that narcissists activate when they realize they've lost control over you. A calculated system that transforms your greatest virtue, your empathy, into the most lethal weapon against your own freedom. But there's something even more disturbing that Jung revealed about this. And if you don't know how to recognize the signs, you could lose years of healing in a matter of weeks.
There's a specific moment that Jung identified as the activation point of the protocol. It's not when you shout. It's not when you fight. It's when you might be stopping to need their approval. Jung called this individuation, the process by which you become who you really are, independent of others' expectations. For normal people, this is liberating. For narcissists, this is a declaration of war. You see, they always knew you were strong, but while you directed that strength toward pleasing, serving, and sacrificing yourself for them, everything was under control. The problem arises when you might be redirecting that same strength to build a life that perhaps doesn't need their validation. That's when the protocol is activated. Jung discovered there are 3 specific signs that trigger this response in narcissists. First, when you might be stopping to explain yourself. Before, every decision of yours needed to be justified, negotiated, approved. Now, you perhaps simply inform, "I'm not doing this anymore." Period. Second, when you might be stopping to absorb their emotions. Before, if they were irritated, you felt guilty. If they were sad, you felt responsible for fixing it. Now you perhaps listen, acknowledge, but no longer carry the emotional weight that isn't yours. Third, when you might be starting to question narratives you always accepted as truth. Maybe I'm not that sensitive. Maybe the problem isn't with me. Maybe I deserve to be treated with respect. Jung observed that narcissists have an extremely sharp psychological antenna to detect these changes. They sense when you might be crossing the line from being someone they can control to someone they need to destroy.
The first phase of the protocol is silent, almost imperceptible. Jung called it subtle invalidation, a way to make you possibly question your own mental sanity without you realizing what's happening. They start planting microscopic doubts about your perceptions. "Are you sure that's what I said? Wow, you're very sensitive lately. I think you're interpreting things in an exaggerated way." Jung discovered this isn't forgetfulness or difference of perspective. It's a calculated technique to make you doubt your own judgment. If they can shake your confidence in your own perceptions, they can rebuild reality according to their convenience. The most sinister part is that they specifically attack the areas where you've grown the most. If you might have learned to recognize manipulation, they'll say you're seeing things that don't exist or interpreting everything as an attack. If you perhaps developed self-esteem, they'll insinuate you're arrogant or changed for the worse. Jung observed that this phase serves a dual purpose, making you question if your healing is real and making you miss the previous version of yourself, the one that was easier to deal with. They whisper things like, "You were happier before you started reading all those self-help books. Before, you were more spontaneous. Now you analyze everything. I miss how we were before you became so introspective." The implicit message is clear. Your personal evolution might have destroyed something beautiful between you. And if you're not careful, you might start believing it.
Jung discovered that when subtle invalidation doesn't work, narcissists move to the second phase, nostalgic hijacking. They start obsessively romanticizing the past, specifically the version of you that was more controllable. Remember how you used to trust me before you told me everything? We were so close when you didn't question every word I spoke. Jung called this nostalgic hijacking because they literally hijack your positive memories and use them as evidence that your personal evolution was a mistake. The psychological trick here is brutal. They make you miss your own suffering. Think about it. They don't miss you. They miss the dynamic where you constantly sacrificed yourself to maintain harmony, where you swallowed your needs to not create problems, where you apologized for things that weren't your fault. Jung observed that this phase is particularly effective because it touches a deep part of us that really misses the simplicity of the time when we didn't question anything. There was a certain peace in not knowing we deserved more. They whisper, "Before you weren't so complicated. You used to be so present, now you're always in your head. We lost that special connection we had." And here's what Jung discovered that's most disturbing. Part of you might agree with them because growing hurts. Setting boundaries is exhausting. And sometimes you might really miss that naive version of yourself that believed love meant completely erasing yourself.
Jung discovered that when both invalidation and nostalgia fail, narcissists activate the most devastating weapon in the protocol: fabricated vulnerability. Suddenly, they have an emotional breakdown, a health crisis, financial problems, family drama, deep depression, and the timing is always perfect, right when you're strongest and most resistant to previous manipulations. Here's the brutal revelation Jung left us. This isn't coincidence, it's calculated. Jung discovered that narcissists maintain a detailed mental file about what awakens your compassion. They know exactly which triggers make you abandon your boundaries and run to save them. And they save this information for emergency moments, when nothing else works. Fabricated vulnerability is the final weapon because it exploits your greatest virtue, your empathy. They transform your kindness into the chain that will tie you back to the old pattern. Jung called this virtue inversion, when your noblest qualities become your most vulnerable points. And here's the part that will chill your blood. Often their crisis is real, but Jung discovered they're masters at choosing which crisis to share with you and when. They have other people, other resources, other options, but they come to you because they know you're the one most likely to sacrifice your own evolution to save them.
But Jung discovered something even more disturbing about this dynamic. Something that will make you question everything you thought you knew about empathy. What if your kindness wasn't just a virtue, but also a trap? Jung observed that empathetic people can become preferred targets, not just because they're easy to manipulate, but because they represent something the narcissist abandoned long ago: the possibility of genuine connection. Your empathy might be constantly reminding them of what they could have been if they had chosen vulnerability instead of control, love instead of domination, authenticity instead of mask. That's why when you might be starting to heal,
You're not just setting boundaries, you might be showing them that it's possible to be strong without being cruel, compassionate without being submissive, loving without being controllable. And this terrifies them more than any direct confrontation ever would.
Jung identified specific patterns that reveal when the protocol has been activated against you. They're subtle signs, but unmistakable if you know what to look for. First sign, they start questioning your version of facts more frequently and intensely. Are you sure that's how it happened? Your memory seems a bit confused lately. That's not quite how I remember it. Second sign, they introduce imaginary witnesses into conversations. Everyone thinks you've changed. People are commenting on your behavior. So-and-so told me you've been acting strange. Third sign, they start documenting your inconsistencies and using them against you. Yesterday you said one thing, today you're saying another. You keep changing your mind. Can't trust what you say. Jung discovered that the goal of these signs is to make you feel psychologically unstable, as if your perception of reality isn't reliable, as if you've suddenly lost control or gone crazy. The most sinister part is that they do this precisely when you might be more lucid and aware than ever. It's a cruel paradox. At the moment when you perhaps finally see things clearly, they work to convince you that you've lost the ability to see. Jung observed that many people might abandon their healing journey at this point because they believe they've become paranoid or difficult to deal with. They prefer to return to the old pattern rather than deal with the feeling of going crazy. But Jung warned us, if you're questioning whether you're being manipulated, you probably are. Truly disturbed people rarely have this self-awareness.
Jung developed a specific strategy to deactivate the protocol without becoming cold or cruel: differentiated compassion. Differentiated compassion is the ability to feel empathy for someone's pain without feeling responsible for solving it. It's the difference between "I feel your pain" and "I need to heal your pain." Jung discovered that you can recognize their suffering without accepting that you're responsible for that suffering. You can validate that their crisis is real without agreeing that you should sacrifice your boundaries to solve it. The question Jung suggested in moments of crisis is helping this person helping me become who I really am, or is it preventing me from making this journey? Because Jung knew that narcissists don't just want your help, they want proof that they still have power over you. They want you to demonstrate that they still matter more than your own well-being.
Jung discovered there's a specific moment when you can know you've won, when you can watch the performance of fabricated vulnerability without feeling guilt. It's not coldness, it's not lack of compassion, it's clarity. You can see the real pain they carry, but also see how they use that pain as a control tool. You can recognize that they chose to come to you, specifically you, at the exact moment when it would be hardest for you to say no. Jung called this illuminated compassion, the ability to love someone without losing yourself in them, to offer support without sacrificing yourself, to be empathetic without being submissive. And here's the final irony Jung observed. When you might be stopping being controllable, you might become genuinely useful, because now you perhaps can offer real perspective, healthy boundaries, love without dependency. But narcissists don't want that. They'd rather lose you than have you in a way they can't control. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche and reached a devastating conclusion about relationships between narcissists and empathetic people.
It's an ancestral dance between those who abandoned their humanity in favor of power, and those who almost lost their power in favor of humanity. In ancient cultures, this dynamic appears repeatedly in myths. The tyrant, who fears the light because it reveals his darkness. The king who kills the prophets because they speak truths he no longer hears. The inflated ego that destroys everything that reminds him of his own mortality. Jung saw that this isn't just an individual psychological issue, it's a cultural, historical, universal pattern. Narcissists represent the part of humanity that chose the illusion of control over the reality of vulnerability. And empathetic people represent the part that still believes in the possibility of genuine connection. That's why their resistance to your healing might be so fierce. You might be proving that it's possible to be strong without being destructive, that it's possible to have power without abusing it, that it's possible to be human without being weak. That night, sitting before the fire, Jung understood something that would forever change how he saw human relationships. The narcissist's secret protocol only works while you don't know it exists. The moment you recognize subtle invalidation, it loses power. The moment you see nostalgic hijacking, you stop missing your own suffering. The moment you identify fabricated vulnerability, you can offer compassion without sacrificing yourself. Jung discovered that narcissists don't fear your anger, they fear your clarity. They don't fear your strength, they fear your freedom. Because a truly free person doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need to control anyone, doesn't need to diminish others to feel great. And this freedom, Jung knew, is contagious. Every time you might be resisting the protocol, every time you might choose your authenticity over their approval, you're not just freeing yourself, you might be showing that it's possible. And for someone who built their entire identity on the belief that controlling others is the only way to feel safe, this possibility is the most terrifying thing in the world. That night, I understood everything. And since then, whenever the world weighs heavy, I return to the fire. See you soon.